Excellent. Welcome to Veggie Happenings, January 2022. There's lots of exciting things. It's really hard to narrow things down for this webinar. There are so many exciting things that are happening this time of year. And as you can tell, we are going to be talking about sweet potatoes and how to grow those. We were always told don't grow sweet potatoes in Sonoma County, but one of our new master gardeners, Ann Haddix, says, no, you can grow sweet potatoes here, as other people I've heard have said that as well. So we have Ann talking on sweet potatoes. We have a very wonderful master gardener, Jude Sharp, that is going to be talking about our favorite slugs and snails. And Kitty Ritz is a master gardener 2016. That is going to be talking about tools. Kathleen Fitzgerald-Orr and Nancy Kreveling are master food preservers, and they're going to be teaching you how to preserve lemons. I bet lots of you have lemons this time of year. So I just wanted to remind you that your audio and video will be off for this webinar. If you could please put the questions in the Q&A box. And this Zoom talk is being recorded. So, okay. So here's some resources for you if you would like to go through and find out some food gardening with less water. And yes, you know, we really do need to think about gardening with less water still, even though many of us have all these buckets out that we caught the last rain. It's been dry for a while, and you know, we don't get our water from the snowpack. In Sonoma County, it's coming from Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino. So if you've seen those reservoirs, they're definitely still low. It's going to take quite a while. So it's California. We always want to be careful with our water. So this is how you can get to our resources for our UC gardening with less water. And if you go into our site, which is fabulous, of course, you would just go to this drop-down menu and it says food gardening, and you're going to go to food gardening with less water, and it'll bring up a plethora of resources for you. So you may want to take your phone right now, and this is the QR code that will get you into the Master Gardener resources, the first 3 talks. The last talk is going to be a separate QR code. So as master gardeners, we're under the umbrella of UCANR, and we go through the University of California. So we're all science-based research. And by the way, you need to double check. If you're looking up things online, look at the date that things were posted, because everything is pretty time sensitive. You know, everything changes with the crazy weather and the world that we're in. Make sure that you're getting current information. We're giving you the best we've got at this moment. So, you know, take into account when this is up on YouTube, if you go and do it 5 years later, some of it may need to be updated, as with anything. So we always go through, and our tenets are to nurture and protect the soil above all else. We plant the right plant in the right place at the right time. So some people are getting super excited about planting tomatoes, for instance. Obviously, if you plant those now, they're not going to do very well. We need to work with nature. We use compost and organic amendments. We use flowers that benefit plants and beneficial insects. We try to get blooms throughout the year. We practice minimal soil disturbance. We don't go through and till in the amendments into the soil. We don't use synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides as much as possible. And we mulch to save water and to prevent weeds. So without further ado, let's see, there was one more thing I wanted to tell you. No, I think I've got it. We're very excited to have Ann talk to us today about growing sweet potatoes in Sonoma County. And I'm going to introduce Ann. She was raised on a small farm in the Central Valley. She has a bachelor's degree in botany and a PhD in agricultural economics, and spent most of her career in the South, working for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She returned to California in 2017 with a desire to pursue her earlier passions for botany and gardening. Thank goodness. And was a 2020 Master Gardener trainee, the first Zoom class. She's committed to exploring how gardeners can help restore and regenerate the environment, and is an avid vegetable gardener. So here's the expert, and she's going to tell us how to grow sweet potatoes in Sonoma County. Take it away, Ann.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about my experience with growing sweet potatoes in Sonoma County. I've grown them for 2 years now, so I can't exactly say I'm an expert, but I've gotten a good crop both years, so I'm off to a good start. So first of all, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I started growing sweet potatoes. I started growing them in the middle of March in 2020. It was lockdown, and I felt I really needed to have a lockdown project. So I was looking around, okay, what should I do? I've got, I don't want to get too bummed out about the COVID pandemic. Of course, we had no idea at that point what was coming. So I thought, okay, well, what can I do that's different? What can I do that I can do right now? And so I thought, well, I'll grow sweet potatoes. I'm really good at potatoes, so how about sweet potatoes? And that set me on a very interesting journey. And I'll tell you a little bit about it and give you some ideas on what you can do. But sweet potatoes actually turn out to be a great project to do with kids. I did mine with my dog, as I don't have any kids. It's a great school project because all the fun parts of growing sweet potatoes happen when school's in session and not during the summertime. And you can start them right in your windowsill. You don't need special light conditions. You don't need any special potting soil, anything like that. So let's get started, and hopefully by the end of this talk, I will have convinced you that to give sweet potatoes a try. Well, first of all, sweet potatoes are a vine. They're an herbaceous perennial vine that produces tuberous roots, which we eat. Contrary to many myths, they're not potatoes. They're in the morning glory family. And also, they're not yams. Yams are food that's grown most commonly in Africa and also in a totally different family. Sweet potatoes are native to Central and South America and have probably been domesticated for over 5,000 years. So a little bit of the oldest sweet potatoes were found from 80 BC in a canyon in Peru. So they've been around a long time. There's actually even early sweet potatoes in Polynesia, which seem to indicate that there was contact between South American people and Polynesian people rather than the sweet potato evolving in both places, which I find is really interesting. But now they're everywhere. They're pretty much span the globe, and everybody grows them, and they're a very common crop for both human and animal consumption. Sweet potatoes in many cultures use both the tubers and the vines. Pigs love sweet potato vines. The young leaves are used in stir fries in many cultures, and we all know how to use the tubers, from everything from sweet potato salad to mashed sweet potatoes with marshmallows on top for Thanksgiving. Actually, this is a great opportunity to work with your kids and have them start growing some of their own Thanksgiving dinner. Start now in January and you'll have sweet potatoes by November. One thing I do want to say as we start out on this journey is that sweet potato vines might be toxic to dogs and cats. They appear to be mildly toxic, and if the dogs or cats ingest the vines or chew on the vines, they can cause gastrointestinal upsets, and in cats, they can cause some dermatitis around the mouth and tongue. So just be careful if you have one of those dogs or cats that likes to rampage through your garden, munching things that are growing out there. There's really two types of sweet potatoes, and I have grown both. There's two categories. There are actually over, I think, 3,000 different varieties of sweet potatoes, but they fall into two categories. The dry fleshed Japanese sweet potato, it's the purple one. And if you cut it open, it has a white interior. And then the one on the right there is the garnet sweet potato. It's called the moist flesh sweet potatoes. They're generally yellow or red inside. They're oftentimes referred to as yams, but they're not yams. They are sweet potatoes and in the sweet potato family. And it's really that moist fleshed one that is super high in vitamins and beta carotenes, and both are extremely nutritious and good sources of fiber, but the moist flesh one is really high in those vitamins you find in the yellow flesh vegetables. Sweet potatoes are a warm climate plant. With climate change, it's more and more likely that we'll be able to grow them in Sonoma County. I just want to say I live in West County, so I live in one of the cooler parts of the county, and I get a fairly reasonable sweet potato crop, or I have for the last 2 years, even though last year was particularly cool. So those of you who are over in the northern part of the county or in the Santa Rosa Plain or places where it gets hotter, you should probably have pretty good luck. Now, they do like loose, well-drained, nutrient-rich soil. They like sandy loam soil. They do not like clay soil. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. I grow mine in a mix of potting soil, 50-50 mix of potting soil and my own compost. And that works really well. It's really loose, and they seem to do fine there. We can tolerate a pH of about 5.5 to 7. So it's the range in which most of our vegetable gardens are. So sweet potatoes are an incredibly forgiving plant. So they do well in a variety of conditions. They like potassium and phosphorus, but hold back on nitrogen. So if you do feel like you need to fertilize during the season after you plant them, it's a long season, 4 to 5 months. Just be sure you get an organic fertilizer that is low in nitrogen, because the nitrogen will cause the vines to grow and reduce tuber production. They like full sun, and they have a long growing cycle, 120 to 240 days. And I've pretty much grown mine. 120 days is about 4 months, and I did mine 4 months the first year and 5 months the second year. Wasn't a lot of difference in production. So they're as long as you can get them in the ground by July, you should be okay. So sweet potatoes are also a good plant to grow because they're fairly pest and disease free. Biggest problems probably weeds, and probably the other big problem in Sonoma County are those little mammals that tunnel everywhere underground, the gopher, because the sweet potato can be a very tasty source of food. So that's definitely something to consider. Okay, starting sweet potatoes from slips. So sweet potatoes are really different from potatoes. You don't plant them in the ground. You don't take a whole sweet potato and plant them in the ground and the plant comes up from the eyes. You actually have to produce slips first, get those growing as plants, and then plant those out into your garden. But even though it takes a while to do this, it makes it really fun because frankly, you can start them right now. And as you see from the picture on the left, I've got it growing on my windowsill, no grow lights, nothing. It's really easy to grow. And the first thing I learned is, well, the first year I grew, I started out, I just tucked 3 toothpicks in the sweet potato. I don't remember, maybe you remember this from a school project, and stuck it in a jam jar and let it go. The first year I did red garnet and a Japanese sweet potato. The red garnet promptly rotted, so I ended up with just the Japanese one there. And the Japanese sweet potato took 6 weeks to really put out any shoots. You can see them there coming up. The second year I did them both again, and what happened was the red garnet started putting out shoots right away in January. The Japanese again took 6 weeks, but all of a sudden I had all these plants and it wasn't nearly warm enough to put them out. But I found that even when I potted them up, getting them ready to transplant, even though I kept them in their little pots until the soil got warm, it didn't really make any difference. So you can start them anywhere from now until probably sometime in March. Once the sweet potatoes are growing, And once they grow, you pull that shoot off the sweet potato plant and stick it in water. You can see that on the picture, there you go. Those are sticking in water, and let them root, and then you pot them up. Now, the picture at the top that shows the sweet potatoes with roots on them, those are actually ones and this is how forgiving sweet potatoes are, that I planted upside down. It said stick the pointy end in the water, so I did that. One of the pointy ends shot up from the top, and the other pointy end one started growing the slips under the water, but it grew slips and roots at the same time, and they did just fine. So don't worry if that starts happening. So here you go. Here's a picture of the one that I rooted upside down.
And just so you know, you're at 10 minutes.
Thank you. But I planted it, and it pulled those off, and it did really fine. And I want to tell you that those two sweet potatoes that you're looking at right there in that picture produced 36 plants. So you'll get and you probably maybe only need 3 or 4. Okay. So here I planted my sweet potatoes in containers. I didn't really have room in my raised bed for these. And I thought if I did it in containers like this, it would warm up the soil faster. You want the soil about 65 degrees before you plant it out. That's the point at which they'll really start in on tuber production. You plant them earlier than that, they'll just kind of grow along. And when the soil gets warm, they'll really get going. So you don't really need to be out there taking the temperature. So put them in something well drained and get them out in your garden. Next slide. So here they are in my garden. The one picture on the left shows just after I planted them out, and the picture on the right shows them when they're almost full grown. These are vines that don't go up unless you train them up. They're they're vines that working on the ground. They spread on the ground. So, and I learned that. I thought, oh, these are going to climb and go up, but no, they just kind of drop down and spread on the ground there. I like having those in the light plastic containers because it makes them first of all, the plastic heats up and makes the soil warm, and it also makes them really easier to tip over and harvest. So I thought one of the things I learned about sweet potatoes is they do like it warmer, and I still had one plant left. And so I potted it up in a pot and stuck it in my greenhouse. My greenhouse was my second-year lockdown project. If you're looking to reduce stress in your life because of something like a pandemic and you buy a greenhouse kit, don't think it'll reduce stress. It doesn't when you try to put it together. But my greenhouse went up. I stuck my sweet potato in there, and it really just took over. It spread vines everywhere. Now that orange flower you see is from another plant. It's not a sweet potato flower, but I just wanted to show you, I trained the vines up, and then it kept putting out shoots and moving along the ground. So that was just in one tub. One of the most important things about sweet potatoes is that they do need to be watered regularly. And they do, because if you don't water them regularly, the roots can crack. Then they're susceptible to rotting. The directions say stop watering 2 weeks before harvest. I never really did that, and it really wasn't a problem. But as you can see from this picture, I put it in because I have a little spaghetti line with inline emitters at 6 inches wrapping around the inside of the pot. It's just on one of my irrigation zones. So basically all summer long, I don't do anything except admire it. Okay, here's my harvest of sweet potatoes. You can harvest these sometime before the first frost. So you can leave them in the ground pretty much as long as you want up until the frost are up, or you want to harvest them at least 2 to 3 weeks before Thanksgiving if you're planning on having them for Thanksgiving dinner. And this is so I just dump them out and harvest them. You get roots of all sizes. Even if you don't get big roots, it's important to note that those small roots, when you roast them, they roast really fast for one thing. And so you don't have to wait a whole hour before your sweet potatoes are ready. And they're just as tasty as the big ones. And some of the people I've shared them with have said they're even tastier. You need to bring them in after you harvest them and cure them in a warm, humid place for 2 to 3 weeks or longer. And that's where the sweetening really occurs. And then you store them them, and they can be stored all year round in a cool, dry place. The sweet potato in my hand is the one sweet potato that came out of my greenhouse. It was the biggest sweet potato of the entire harvest. All right, here's a timeline just to wrap things up and give you an idea of how this progresses through the year. So you can start your sweet potatoes by sticking in the toothpicks anywhere from January to March. And they'll take anywhere, they may take up to 8 weeks, maybe even a little longer from the time you actually stick the sweet potato in water until your transplanted little pots of plants are ready to put out. But again, there's a wide range. You can keep them in pots until it's warmed up and you're ready to go. February and May is when you're pulling your slips off, rooting them in water, potting them up, and take care of the little pots. They don't need an extra light, any more light than houseplants at that point. So there's really no special indoor requirements. And then you can transplant them out in May and June. I think as long as you get them in the ground by July 1st, you should have a pretty decent crop. October, November is when you're harvesting your sweet potatoes, partly whether they've died back, partly whatever other work is on your schedule. And then October through December, you're letting them cure and putting them up for storage and getting them ready for Thanksgiving dinner. So there's really a lot you can do. And if you're doing it for a school project, you can see that the really fun part happens between January and May. They just grow during the summer. And then when the kids get back to school, you get to harvest them. So it's really a great fun project. So I really would encourage everybody to give sweet potatoes a try. And I would really encourage everybody trying sweet potatoes to share how you did them and how it worked and what kind of harvest you got. So hopefully we'll be hearing more from you about that. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. That was wonderful. After we did our practice, several of us went out, got sweet potatoes, and started them immediately. So now something that we're all facing right at this point, it's snails and slugs. And if you have any greens or brassicas, anything growing in your garden, you've been seeing these. So my friend Jude Sharp is going to tell us what we can do about snails and slugs.
Okay. So the first thing to know about, can you hear me okay? The first thing to know about snails and slugs is that for today's purposes, we're talking about the brown garden snail and the gray garden slug. There are over 300 snails and slugs, varieties of snails and slugs in California, but most of them are not pests. All are mollusks. They have a similar structure in biology. The snails have an external shell, the slugs do not. They need a moist surface for mobility. They feed at night and they hide during the day. What you can do and should do is to regularly assess your garden. Get out there, look for shiny, slimy trails, look for holes in leaves and flowers and fruit, and look for eggs. In the picture, the photograph of the eggs on the left are snail eggs. The picture in the middle are slug eggs, and look for eggs on or just below the surface of the soil and under leaves. But stay on top of eggs because the older they get, the more likely it is that you will have snails and slugs. Okay. You want to hand pick or trap the snails that you find and the slugs that you find. You want to remove hiding places like weeds or debris or shady shelter. You want to reduce moisture because they need moisture to get around. So you want to reduce the moisture, but you can do that by watering in the mornings or using drip. You want to plant your garden in the sunniest spot possible. And you want to consider using snail-proof plants like lavender, rosemary, geranium, stuff that's highly scented. Okay, next slide. It's preferable, of course, to manage without using pesticides. So again, you want to look for hiding places, remove those hiding places, trap the snails and using boards or overturned pots. And whenever you find them, you want to dispose of them daily. Take them and feed them to chickens or ducks or geese or whatever domestic fowl you might have around, or friends with domestic fowl, or you can put them in a paper bag and kill them and then put them in the compost. If you decide to use pesticides, and by pesticides I mean snail baits, first do everything that we've talked about before by reducing moisture, shelter, and hiding places. And then if you decide to use baits, then add them. Metaldehyde baits are very toxic to pets and plants, to pets and birds. So don't use them. Don't use metaldehyde baits if you can avoid it. Look on the label and see what's in the bait that you're using. Iron phosphate baits are much safer to use with children, pets, and wildlife. But whatever you decide to do, use baits sparingly. Look at the instructions, see what's in the baits, follow the instructions, and store and dispose of them appropriately. Okay. Again, snails and slugs are not going to go away on their own, so you have to persist, stay on it, and rely on a combination of methods for discouraging and getting rid of them. Okay, good luck.
Awesome. Thank you, Jude. You make it sound so easy. So
Hey.
oh, we hope, fingers crossed. And so here's Kitty Ritz, one of your favorite and my favorites too. And she's my go-to, of course, whenever I have those deep questions about gardening that I need answered. Kitty always knows. So today, Kitty's going to talk to us about a Japanese style pruning saw.
All right, Japanese style pruning saws. It is time for dormant fruit tree pruning. So what does a pruning saw need to be? It needs to be very sharp, it needs to be light, and it needs to be flexible. That means not that it needs to be bendy, but that you should be able to use it both in close and up high. So I took an aesthetic pruning class not long ago, and I discovered the Japanese style razor edge pruning saw. So this is the handheld portion of the saw. And what makes it a razor edge saw is that the teeth are sharpened on 3 sides. So go look at your pruning saws and you will see that most of them are not like this. This is a special kind of blade. It is perfect for pruning green wood because it cuts on the pull. Now, I had been using a Sawzall with a pruning blade, but it is really hard to handle for people with sore wrists, sore elbows, sore shoulders, any of those things. This saw works for me, and I have all those issues. Next slide, please. So you have the short handheld version, and then you have a handy dandy aluminum pole that you can mount it on, and it has a screw mount. And that is really good for people who have issues with their hands because you don't have to pinch or pull anything. Screwing is much easier. So this is now about 3 feet long, and you can use it for those down low branches or reaching deep into a shrub or something like that. And then you can telescope this out again with a screw a screw mount so that it's 6 feet long. And the Japanese pruning saw is my friend because it is very sharp. So don't lose the little plastic tubing that goes over the edge because you will hurt yourself. It is extremely light because it's hollow, it's aluminum, and it's very flexible. You can use it for your up close pruning and your up high pruning. And as the great New Orleans singer Marsha Ball says, the right tool for the job.
Thank you, Kitty.
Thank you.
And I feel like too, all the things that you said, I need it light. I've got this great saw that is like a chainsaw that goes on. My husband got it for me. It goes on a pole, and so I could, trim things up high. It's too heavy. I need something light, and that looks perfect. Okay. So now we're going to go on to Master Food Preservers, and the UC Master Food Preserver Program mission is to keep Californians safe, as well as use culturally appropriate research-based practices to safely preserve food in the home, reducing food waste, big thing, and increasing food security, very important, and providing engaging ways for Californians to explore healthy food. So in Sonoma County, we are into our second year, starting into our third year of the Master Food Preservers group. And it's a fabulous organization. I'm a Master Food Preserver as well. And behind me, you can see some of our books. Oops, no, you can't, probably. I will show those to you later. But I just wanted to let you know that right now, we still have, for a couple more days, you can sign up if you'd like to be a Master Food Preserver volunteer. And it does require time, obviously, but boy, it's well worth it. And then you can use up everything in your garden. And make sure it all gets eaten. So today we have Kathleen Fitzgerald Orr, whom I'm sure if you're a regular viewer, you all know. Kathleen is not only a master gardener and master food preserver, she is also a nurse. And so you always feel safe canning with Kathleen because she knows what she's doing. And she's going to tell us a little bit about preserving citrus.
Thank you, Toby, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. Thank you for joining us today. And January is National Citrus Month. And just a few of the varieties that you can grow here in Sonoma County are on this slide. If you can find kumquats, we have some wonderful recipes for canning them. And I'm lucky enough to have a Buddha hand in my backyard. And so I use that for making citron. Next slide, please. So what makes citrus in January so special? Well, we've all been pretty cold this last month. Citrus fruits hit their peak during the winter months at a time when we could all use some healthy sunshine and vitamin C. Do remember that citrus fruits do not ripen. They do not continue to ripen once they're picked off the tree. But citrus is delicious no matter how you prepare it. Grate them, using the peel for zest, juice them, freeze them, and preserve them. Next slide, please. Today's demonstration, which Nancy will lead, is preserved lemons. And if you are fortunate, as I am, to have Meyer lemons at home, you'll want to give this a try. It's very easy. Next slide, please. Ways to use preserved lemons: add them to a farro or barley salad, add sliced pieces to a salad or salad dressing, chop them up and add them to your salsas and dips, and use preserved lemon pieces in pasta dishes, tangines, and stews. I've included here a recipe that I think is absolutely delicious, preserved lemon couscous, and some other preserving tips. Salt preserved lemons require no canning. They're quick and easy, and all you need to do is wash the salt off before using. So if you are on a low sodium diet, you can make these work. Thank you, and we'll move on to our demonstration.
Okay, so wait just 1 second, Nancy, and I'll get you up here. So I'm going to give you these resources. First of all, the So Easy to Preserve book is fabulous, and you can feel really safe to go through and use all those recipes right from there. And we have a wonderful Master Food Preserver website, as well as a Facebook page, which Kathleen monitors, and she's the one that puts all the information on there. So lots of great, great information. Okay, so let me go back one, and now I'm going to stop my share, and we are going to go on to Nancy, and Nancy's going to show us. Let me see if I can mute myself. Nancy is coming to us from her own kitchen today, and she's going to show us how to preserve lemons. This is the final product, and you could see it. It's Kathleen's, I'm sure, that was on her first slide. So Nancy, I'm going to let you take it away. And
okay, thanks, Toby. Happy National Citrus Month, everybody. So today we're doing preserved lemons. And before I got on screen, I did a few things in preparation. I sterilized the jars. I sterilized my surface that I'm using with a bleach spray. And I'm sure you're all familiar with this from COVID. And if you go on the Master Food Preservers website, they'll give you all the proportions and everything that you need. You do need to do a new solution daily. It loses its effectiveness after about 24 hours. So preserving lemons, I also pulled my hair back, washed my hands. All the utensils are clean. I sterilized these jars, boiled them for 10 minutes in a steam canner. You can do that in a regular canner at home, or if you have a sterilizing cycle on your dishwasher, it might be kind of an energy inefficient way to use energy, but you could do it that way. I washed the lids and the rings, and also washed all the lemons, and I use this little cute brush that Kathleen loaned me to make sure that any little stuff that got on the lemon skin definitely got off. So that almost takes more time than actually doing the preparation. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tablespoon of salt into the bottom of each of the jars. And this is canning and pickling salt. It's available at your grocery stores. It's usually down on the bottom shelf. This recipe calls for a tablespoon. Some recipes only call for a teaspoon. And you might wonder why we're using canning and pickling salt rather than regular salt. This doesn't have any iodine in it. And it also doesn't have any anti-clumping ingredients. So your finished product is going to look much better than if you use regular table salt. And this is a great thing to give for a gift. So you probably want it to look as beautiful as it can. So then my next thing is I started cutting off the stem ends of the lemons. And then we're going to cut what they call a lemon flower, which is basically just quarters, but you're not going to go all the way through. So hopefully you can see this. And then we're going to put another tablespoon of, whoa, I goofed and I made it go all the way through, which is actually okay, because I read in one of the approved recipes that you can actually do it with quarter lemons as well. So we're good to go here. Again, I dropped it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is do my tablespoon of salt. Actually, I'm going to do it over this bowl. Just sprinkle it in there. And I'm going to put it in upside down And here's another thing where recipes vary. Some say to put it in upside down, some say to put it right side up. And at this point, if you want to do any flavorings for your preserved lemons, like if you want, they use it in a lot of Moroccan dishes and Middle Eastern dishes. So you might want to add some flavorings that complement that cuisine. So today we're going to add cinnamon sticks, bay leaf, and red chili peppers. And for that, I think I'm going to put on some gloves.
So why all the salt? What's up with all the salt?
So those of us on a salt-free diet might wonder that, yes. The salt is a preserver, so we're not going to be canning this, and we're not going to be drying it. So the salt will help pull out the moisture, which makes it impossible for the bacteria to grow, which of course is a really good thing. This does need to stay in the refrigerator though, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
And what kind of chilies are you using?
I don't know, Kathleen, what kind of chilies are these?
Sort of medium dehydrated red chilies. Just something I picked up at the grocery store. I didn't actually dry them myself.
Okay, so now we've got that in our jar. And we're going to continue on with the lemons. I'll see if I can do this one right this time.
Now, did you cut off the ends, right? You cut off either.
Yeah, I'll cut off the end.
Okay.
The stem end.
Damn it.
This one I cut off both ends by mistake. Oh, I got to do the salt.
And we have one of our master food preservers is actually a chef in Sonoma County. And when he does this, he adds the flavors to the salt also.
Ah,
Dried spices and that kind of thing.
so we can probably do about 4 lemons in this pint jar. And then I'm going to squeeze another lemon just for lemon juice. I think if I do it again, I'll do it with quarters of lemons, actually. And then also back to the salt. When you actually use the lemon, you'll rinse off the salt. So the bulk of the salt will be gone at that point.
So you're just jamming them in there, huh?
And Kathleen loaned me this cool sauerkraut puncher downer. So I'm going to use that. And what's happening is it starts to juice the lemons and it combines with the salt. So the acid and the salt combined together make this a really safe product. And this is one of the few cases where you can actually use lemon juice from your own lemons rather than commercially prepared lemon juice.
And why can you usually not use your own lemon juice?
Well, because we don't know the pH or the acidity of our own lemon juice. It can vary widely depending on the type of lemon, the ripeness of the lemon. And it's really critical in canning that you have the appropriate acidity level or pH level. And in commercial products, they control for that.
Great.
Okay. I did notice this month too. I subscribed to a couple cooking magazines, of course, and I noticed some recipes for preserved citrus. You can do this with lemons, limes. Kathleen has a Buddha hand over there, and we have a couple different kinds of limes. You could probably do it with orange too.
Yum. So how do you know when you're done squishing them in there? Obviously, when no more will fit, but like, what's the goal? You're trying to get it covered with the juice?
I'm trying to get it covered with the juice. If I can't cover it with the juice of the lemons that are in there, then I'll add more lemon juice.
Oh, okay.
I also don't want it to be too high. So there's a fill line on your jar right under the threads. And that's what I'm trying for here.
Okay.
So I'm pushing, get the air out. And I think I've got it. And let's see.
Ooh,
Okay, I'm going to add a little more juice. When I push down, it covers it, but it's not covering if I don't push down on it. So I want to be safe and not sorry later on. So I'm doing this over another strainer just to be sure that none of the seeds get in, and it helps make the juice that much clearer, which makes for a prettier product in the end. Oh, this one's really juicy. All right.
And how long do you have to let it sit in the refrigerator before you use that?
Well, you want to let it sit outside of the refrigerator for 3 to 4 days, and I've read even up to a week.
Oh,
And then you could use it at that point. But after that, you want to go ahead and refrigerate it. And you can keep it in your refrigerator for up to a year. So it's pretty cool because you can use it for a year and then you have a new crop, right? So it's perfect timing.
really?
Is there anything special you need to do to it while it's sitting out for that first 3-4 days to a week?
Yeah. So once you get the lid on it tightly, we're going to turn it upside down. And you want to keep it in a dark place. Need a little more juice here. All right, there we go. So I'm going to put the top and the lid on. Oh, I need to wipe it off though because I have some salt on the edge.
And I just, as a canner myself, one thing I like to caution people is don't go and make like 12 of these right now. You want to make sure that you're really going to use them. And there's lots and lots of ways to use your lemons, limes, and other, citrus up. So try a few. And then if you use them, try more because the lemons last quite a while on the tree as well. So.
Yeah, and you can try it with all sorts of different kinds of citrus. Great for salad dressings, and in some recipes you use only the rind. In some recipes you can pulverize the rind and the fruit. And so there's a lot of options for how you want to use it. So now I've got the lid on. I'm making sure it's on tightly. Oop, still slipping. Okay. So then I want to turn it upside down 3 or 4 times. And this will mix the lemon juice and the salt. And you'll see that the salt is really concentrated at the bottom, of course, because we put so much in on the bottom. But while you're having it just resting for a few days, curing, I guess you might call it. You want to go ahead 2 or 3 times a day and just flip it upside down, back and forth 3 or 4 times. And that'll help the salt dissolve into the lemon juice. And that's it. It's so easy. It's wonderful.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was a great demo. And I'm going to go back and let's see. Yeah. And I'm going to show you, Kathleen's got a bunch of resources for you. So let's say, okay, first of all, I don't remember exactly what she said. We can go through, there it is. And on this, this will lead you right to our Master Food Preservers website, to the section of that site that has the Veggie Happenings resources on it. And so there is the recipe for preserved lemons, plus Kathleen, who introduced this talk, has so many other resources and doing lots of other things with preserved citrus. So take a picture of that. And, or you can go to Sonoma County Master Food Preservers and it will be there as well. And
Toby,
now, yes.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but while you were putting up QR codes, put the one up for Veggie Happenings again, please, or for our site, the first one.
Okay, so let me do that. I will do that. Share it back up. I can do it.
Thank you.
That's the one for Master Food Preservers. And let's see, I will come back and find the one for the Master Gardener resources. I don't know, you could spend all day on the Master Gardener website. I tell you, there is so much incredible information on there. It's just awesome. Okay, so everybody got that one? They'll lead you to 2 different places. We're 2 separate organizations under the same umbrella of University of California Agricultural and Natural Resource Management. So, okay, so now we have some questions. All right, so I'm going, the questions should be in the Q&A, so that's where I'm going.
Yeah, and I can start you with your first question if you'd like.
Hold on just a minute. I'm in an office where I haven't moved and the light went off. Go figure. Okay, that hasn't happened to me before. Okay, so okay.
So the first question is for Anne, and Anne, the question was, if if the sweet potatoes are toxic to dogs and cats, are they deer resistant?
Unfortunately, sweet potatoes are not deer resistant. They're more like deer candy. So deer and other grazers really like to munch on sweet potato vines. So if you do plant them out in a deer area, the deer will thank you for them, but you won't get any sweet potatoes.
Thank you, Anne. And Anne, here's a question from Kathy. And you'll love this one, and everybody will love hearing the answer. What do you use for your warm, moist place to cure your sweet potatoes, Anne?
Well, this will give you an idea on when you should harvest. So you want to harvest your sweet potatoes before it really gets cold. Otherwise, you might not have a warm place to put them in. And I've got the warm part figured out. I don't have the moist part figured out. So I spread my sweet potatoes out on cloth, drop cloth, one of those painter's cloths in my spare bedroom, and just tell any guests that I have that they just got to move around them. But they're all spread out there, curing along with my squash and other things that I've got and my green tomatoes that are ripening. So everything's in there. That it isn't humid in there. I don't generally in my spare bedroom, I don't have the heating or cooling on. So it's just an ambient temperature ramped up by radiant heat through the windows. So it gets pretty warm in there. But they seem to do just fine. Now, some people have said you could put them in bags and with a damp towel and put them up in the attic and lots of different things, but I kind of go with the trouble-free approach. And then after they've cured for probably about a month, because I don't really get around to dealing with them before that, I just put them in a bushel basket. Don't wash them, because washing can cause blemishes in your sweet potato that can lead to fungal infections and rot. So just pack them away in their dirt and put them in a cool, dark place if you can find one.
Perfect, thank you. Here's another question for you, Anne. Are sweet potatoes prone to coming back year after year once planted in your soil? You know, like potatoes do?
Right, and so I have never planted sweet potatoes out in my raised beds or in my borders in my garden. I've only done them in plastic containers, so they obviously don't come back because I dumped them out. But they will come back if there are tubers left in the ground. I mean, I gotta say that they probably won't come back like potatoes, because it seems like potatoes come back even though there's nothing left in the ground. But I haven't had the experience, and people don't report it a problem with sweet potatoes, but they do say that even though the vines will die back in the time, if you leave the tubers in the ground, the sweet potato will come back. And I think, Toby, there was another question in the chat. Did you see? Okay.
I got those 3 so far. It may have been answered, you know, online, but we'll come back to you too. So okay, Kitty. So, oh no, sorry, Jude. This question is for you. Regarding sluggo, iron phosphate. They're curious why you recommend to use sparingly.
Well, I'd recommend using any bait sparingly. Iron phosphate baits are the safest to use, but it's still a bait. So I would, for that reason, I would recommend using it sparingly. That's the primary reason.
And you know, the other thing I think too is they are sort of costly, especially, you know, and you don't need to have that much. When, for instance, Harvest for the Hungry, where master food gardening specialists, master gardeners have a little demo space, we're always told, you know, make sure you use it just as little as you possibly can, because, you know, we're trying to, you know, grow them as naturally as we can and not use a lot of money.
Yeah, actually, and Toby, that's another good point. Baits are toxic to all slugs and snails, and there are hundreds of slugs and snails that are native to California, and if you don't have to destroy or damage them, better not to. But all baits are toxic, so keep that in mind as you're using them.
Okay, thank you. All right, Kitty, now we have some questions for you. Where did you, I know that, you know, we can't recommend any places, but where would you get the lightweight saw that you, the Japanese pruning saw? Where could you go?
So there are Japanese tool stores. There's one in Berkeley. But other makers are now making this saw and calling it a razor edge saw. So regular tool manufacturers, go to your favorite local hardware store and they may have this. Go to a good pruning tool store and I imagine they will have this. And then there's always the dread online.
We do like to support the local folks. We just
yes, and I have been in stores locally. You know, we're not allowed to tell you where to go, where to shop, but you're a local, you know, hardware guy will be able to tell you.
And the other thing I have to say, not to mention names, but are your local irrigation person would help you as well, because my favorite local irrigation store, I mean, they will even draw you little maps on how to do the irrigation. And
they're the best.
And
they also have good tools.
Great tools, yeah, so fun. Okay, Kitty, let's see. do you have any tips for sharpening or cleaning garden tools?
Okay, so garden tools and pruning tools do need to be sharpened. There was a question that I answered on typed in the chat about trying to sharpen this tool yourself. It's complicated. You will have to look at several YouTubes, and probably you're better off buying a replacement blade, but I've had this for 3 years. Now, if you're pruning 8 hours a day, you might have to learn how to sharpen this saw, and you'll have to get a special tool to do it. But your other pruning shears and loppers and things like that, you will always need a whetstone of some type, and that's easily procured. You will always need some sort of oil or lubricant to put on your blades after you've sharpened them. But the basic thing is you always have to wash your tools, and you should wash your tools between plants whenever you're pruning. There was another question about if you have blight, oh yeah, you're going to wash your tools. And this, rather than using bleach solution, which might pit your blades, it's recommended that you use something like Lysol solution and regular soap and water and some sort of scrubby. Have a bucket full with you at all times, and when in doubt, sharpen. If you've got good pruning secateurs, pruning shears, they come completely apart with a regular screwdriver and maybe a little wrench, and you can clean every single part. There are certain parts that need to be oiled or lubricated and put it back together, and it's a whole new deal. Also, you can buy replacement blades, replacement springs for those things. Again, at your handy dandy local hardware or irrigation store.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's see, Kathleen, we have a couple questions for you, and I don't know if you've read them in the chat yet, but one of them is, will the lemons ferment, and will the jar need to be burped when you're making preserved lemons?
Actually, after you get through the initial process and you need to refrigerate, especially after you open and start using the lemons. At that point, no, you do not have to burp or do anything else to the jar because the salt has already done the preserving, and like we told you earlier, it'll last in your fridge up to a year. So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Perfect. And then another question for you is, where can I purchase the smasher for preserved lemon recipe?
Well, the smasher actually is also called a tamper, or you can just a pestle. Any place that sauerkraut making equipment is sold, and of course, like Kitty said, it can also be ordered on certain online companies.
Perfect, thank you. And sometimes I've seen those that they're sold all in a kit with fermenting supplies, I think. And that I've seen at one of the newer local farm stores. So, and that's, it comes in handy for a lot of different things.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, Jude.
Some of the hardware stores that sell a lot of canning equipment also have these.
Yes, exactly. So Kitty, let's see. Jude. What are your thoughts on beer traps for slugs, snails, earwigs? I use those little cat food cans where you put the beer in and you put it down at the soil level and then they drop in there at night. What do you think about those?
Well, I'm told that they work and that they work fine. I don't use them because it seems to me labor intensive. So I choose to do things as simply as possible. But what I've heard, and and my understanding from talking to people who do use them, is that they work fine. So if you've got enough beer and you've got enough patience and go for it. But I can't speak to it in terms of my own experience because I haven't used it.
I can actually, and I have to say that I think it works well. The problem is the beer. At first, when you think, oh, this is going to be fun and easy, and you take one container, one can of beer, and you put it in, and then it's like, well, that's not quite enough. You need a little bit more. Then the next day, either the irrigation or your dogs love beer, and they find those little cans and they lick it all out. So I think it works really well for like the little pill bugs, the earwigs, those seem to go in. I don't seem to have the slugs and snails go in as much. I do the roll up newspaper deal where it's like Jude was saying, the little traps. We have one question that doesn't really have to do with what we've been doing, but I would like to answer that. Somebody asked, is a pressure cooker canning safer in general? It's different, and we're talking about a pressure canner and a pressure cooker. Those are two different things. So the things that we talked about today don't need canning, but if you're canning things that are low acid, you have to do it in a pressure canner because you just can't get the temperature up high enough to kill off the Clostridium botulinum or whatever would be the bad guys that are in your food or possibly in your food. So, meats, like these green beans, we put in a pressure canner because they are low acid. So, but hey, it sounds like a great question for somebody who wants to be a master food preserver. So if you're thinking you'd really like to be a master food preserver, seriously, go onto our site now. We still have some slots available for interviews, and we'd love to have you. Okay, so anybody else, any other comments, questions? I know we are over at this point, so thank you.
There was one question in the chat about, can you plant sweet potatoes in grow bags?
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay. Would you answer that?
Sure. And the answer is yes, you can grow sweet potatoes in grow bags. You can, if you have a 20, I guess it's a 20-gallon grow bag, you would use about 6 slips of sweet potatoes.
Perfect. Okay, that sounds great. Now, let me go through. I was gonna get you back. Sorry about this. Look away for a moment because we don't have enough time to get all the way through if I do it the other direction. Okay, so we've got that QR code. We answered your questions. Thank you so much for joining us. Come back next month. We have some great things for you to learn about, and we appreciate you being flexible on the time. That wasn't something that we had counted on starting at 12 instead of 12:30, but great job being flexible and being here. So we'll see you next time, but happy gardening and happy food preserving.